Hare Krishna, Namaste.
Chapter 13 is entitled as Kshetrajna Yoga, also as Prakrti-Purusha-Vibhaga Yoga, also as Prakrti-Purusha-Viveka Yoga. Sloka 20, Part 3. Prakṛtiṁ puruṣaṁ caiva viddhy anādī ubhāv api vikārāṁś guṇāṁś caiva viddhi prakṛti-sambhavān. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are product of material nature. In the previous session, we learned that how it is because of the association with the body one can free from oneself getting further bodies. In other words, one doesn't have to be reborn because they get liberated. But that only happens with the help of the body. So one can perform any of the yogas that mentioned by Krishna and progress, cultivate those 20 qualities and attain liberation. On the other hand, it is because of the association of the body that one also accumulate further karmas due to ichcha, dvesha, sukham and dukkham. So far, we have been seeing and hearing more about the connection between the prakrti and the living entity. This prakrti, as we have learned earlier, is known to be mula prakrti, or also called as pradhana, from which the mahan comes, from mahan ahankara comes, etc. So the prakrti is somewhere up in the hierarchy, and I am somewhere. We may not feel the connection of myself with that prakriti. Then how is that prakriti, which is far, impact the variations like ichcha and dvesha, sukham and dukkham, etc.? The answer is, when we speak about prakriti, it is not something we look elsewhere outside of us. The prakriti is close to us. That is nothing than our own body. This body that we have is the product of prakriti, the mula prakriti. Therefore, this body is also called prakṛtiṁ, meaning it is the karyam, it's an effect of the cause, and the cause, karana, is prakriti. From prakriti comes the prakṛtiṁ, that is, from the material nature comes this body. Therefore, prakriti is karanam, or cause. This body is karya. It's the effect because of the cause, which is prakriti. So, the kshetram, the field of activities, which is nothing but the prakriti, which has gone through the transformation, the vikārāṁ, the changes. Because of these changes is what one gets the ichcha, dvesha, sukham, dukkham, etc. And the connection between the Atma and Prakriti is been so long because the Atma is engaged within the Prakriti, the body, and these ichcha and dvesha are not the product of Atma. We should understand that very clearly. But they are because of the connection to the body, where the body makes this variation. Similarly, for one to attain moksha, these 20 qualities that we saw earlier becomes helpful. And these 20 qualities are also because of the prakrti. So it is the prakṛti-sambhavān relationship, connection that causes the bondage, and it is the prakṛti-sambhavān connection that causes the liberation as well. It all depends on how we utilize this body. Swami Desikan in his commentary gives a sketch of how this ichcha and dvesha leads one to further papa and punya. This whole thing can be put into a 2x2 matrix. Jnana ichcha prayatana, jnana dvesha nivritti. These are the two terms we need to know. And these two terms in the combination of scriptural or non-scriptural. Therefore, it's a 2x2 matrix. We get 4 combinations out of this. One is following the scriptures. Another one is not following the scriptures. Now let's understand this. Jnana, ichcha, prayatana. These are the 3 things. Jnana means knowledge. Knowledge that is received through the scriptures. Ichcha means desire. Desire towards those things which is mentioned in the scriptures. Prayatana means the step that's taken, the action towards making the desire happen. So jnana, ichcha, prayatana. Whereas jnana, dvesha, nivritti, meaning jnana, the knowledge, again based on the scriptures. Dvesha, not having a desire to follow what has been told in the scripture. Nivritti, likewise not wanting to follow what has been told in the scripture. This is jnana, dvesha, nivritti. Now let's see what is the result we are going to get because of these combinations. Let's go back to the jnana, ichcha, prayatana. The scriptures provides us various things which is considered to be in different categories. It can either tell us things which helps us to be happy in this very world, or it also provides us the options where we can get liberated from this very world and attain the spiritual world. So these are the knowledge provided in the Vedas, in the scriptures. This jnana, if a person develops a desire to follow, that's called ichcha. And after the desire, if the person further goes into the action, prayatana, and performs that action, the result of that is punya. Punya means merits, good result. So again, jnana, that is the information provided in the Vedas. Ichcha, one develops desire towards that which has been said in the Vedas. Prayatana, and when that person actually performs that activity, then what he gets is punya. The result of punya could be in different forms. It could be sukham, happiness, or gain, that is labha, or victory, jayam, etc. These are the result of punya. Whereas jnana, ichcha, prayatana, if it is not based on the scriptures, that produces papa, sin. Knowledge, not part of the scriptures. A person develops a desire to perform some something which is not recommended by the Vedas, and this person does that action because of the ichcha, will result in producing papa. Papa means by which one gets distress, alabha, failure, dukkham, ajayam means defeat. These are the results of papa because of not having the knowledge from the scripture, jnana, but developing a desire to perform the activity which is not part of the Vedas, and then doing that activities which is not recommended by the Vedas. Therefore, jnana ichcha prayatana, when it is followed as per the scripture, it produces a result which is called punya, and the jnana ichcha prayatana which is done against the recommendation of the scripture, it produces papa. Now let's move on to the next one. Jnana dvesha nivritti, which means knowledge. It's the same thing what we saw earlier. Dvesha means hatred. Nivritti means opposite of prayatana. Prayatana means performing an action. Nivritti here means not performing an action. This also categorized into scriptural and non-scriptural. Like how we saw earlier, jnana ichcha prayatana can be classified into scriptural and non-scriptural. When you are following the scriptural, it produces punya. When you are not following the scripture, it produces papa. Over here, it's the opposite of it. Jnana dvesha nivritti. Jnana, which is based on the scriptures. But dvesha, when a person is not having a desire to follow what has been recommended in the scripture, developing a dvesha, hatred, in doing so, and which leads one to not perform that is being told in the scripture, nivritti, will result in papa, and one enjoys it in the form of defect, loss, distress, etc. Moving on to the next part, jnana dvesha nivritti, that is, when a person avoids doing things which is non-scriptural, which is not being mentioned in the scripture, developing a sort of strong hatred towards things which is not being mentioned in the scripture, and therefore not performing those actions that's not being mentioned in the scripture, is jnana dvesha nivritti, produces punya. That is, jnana ichcha prayatana, when a person develops an hatred in following what has been told in the scripture, hence he doesn't perform that action, that dharma, then that person gets papa. When a person develops hatred towards those things which is not mentioned in the scripture, therefore he doesn't perform those actions which is not mentioned in the scripture, results in producing punya. This whole thing can be put into a 2x2 matrix to really have a good view of what has been said here. It will be pretty simple if we can imagine that table, jnana ichcha prayatana and jnana dvesha nivritti. On the other side, it is scriptural and non-scriptural. Jnana ichcha prayatana, when followed as it is said in the scripture, then it is punya. Jnana ichcha prayatana, when it is followed against the scripture, it is papa. Jnana dvesha nivritti, when it is followed as prescribed in the scripture but not being executed, then it is papa. Jnana dvesha nivritti, when it is not followed because it is not recommended by the scripture, ends in punya. That's all it is. And this is how the papa and punya are classified. And this is how a papa and punya are accumulated by the living entity when they are in connection with the body. So the question is, what is the use of knowing these things? Especially jnana, ichcha, prayatana, jnana, dvesha, nivritti. What's the use of knowing these things? Well, if we don't know this, we don't know how we are getting the papa and punya. If we don't know how we are getting papa and punya, then we will not be able to get rid of them. If we are not able to get rid of them, that means our connection to the body, this prakrti, is going to continue. If it continues, that means a repeated birth, death, disease and old age. On the other hand, if we understand how the punya and papa get accumulated, we can be very careful going forward in the jnana, ichcha, prayatana, jnana, dvesha, nivritti. By knowing this, we can apply properly. We can use this body properly. Therefore, we can gradually cut off the relationship from the prakrti and then attain the spiritual abode. Krishna advises that one must do their karma without expecting result, phalatyaha, which is also one of the 20 qualities we saw earlier. By having this quality, one gets moksha. This is also part of the prakrti. It is prakrti which produces this variation as well. Since we gave up the phala, the fruits of our action, we will not have to enjoy the fruits of victory, happiness, distress, etc. So we do perform our activities, we do perform our karma and dharma and bhakti, but the important main ingredient of our activity is not expecting a result out of it. When we expect a result out of it, then we get caught into the repeated birth. We have to enjoy or we have to suffer because of that. Whereas if we detach ourselves, if we give up the enjoyer mentality, that is, we give up the fruits of our action, phalatyaha, then there is no question for us to enjoy the victory, the gain, the happiness and distress. In this way, the body becomes moksha hetu, helps us in attaining the moksha. If not, the body becomes bandha hetu, becomes the cause of our further entanglement in this world. One last question before we conclude this sloka. We can understand that dukkham, miseries, entangles us into this material existence. But why sukham also entangle us? Generally we feel happiness is good, distress is bad. That's a general idea. Therefore, every living entities are really working hard to get rid of dukkham, miseries, and attain more of sukham, happiness. But it is also important to know like how dukkham entangles us into this material pool equally. In fact, more than that, the happiness entangles us into this material pool. It is more dangerous, happiness is more dangerous than the miseries, pains and failures that we get through our past papa. Because of the punya, we get happiness, we get enjoyment. Because we get that enjoyment, happiness, we always hope for better future. We are hoping, if not now, tomorrow I'll be happy. So we keep pushing to derive, to get that happiness. And especially when we see some good result, maybe a person gets a job, gets a promotion, gets a spouse, gets a child, gets a admission in a reputed institute for one's higher education. These are all considered to be success, victory, gain, which produces happiness. But these are nothing but bandha hetu, meaning cause of our bondage, further bondage into this world. So, with the pain, suffering, failures, one may develop frustration, hatred towards this world. But through the sukham, happiness, victory, success, one develops further hope. Therefore, the happiness that caused by punya is much more severe, dangerous than the papam, which produces distress, pain and failure. So the obvious open question is, neither I should accumulate papa nor I should accumulate punya. So what am I supposed to do to get out of this situation? But once we have the body, it is going to produce papa or punya. What am I going to do now? Well, we try to apply the 20 qualities that we saw earlier. Therefore, we don't get into the bandha hetu, ichcha, dvesha, sukha, dukkha. Rather, we focus on the moksha hetu, amanitvam, adambitvam, and so forth. And these qualities can be obtained by simply continuing to do our dharma, our karma. Whatever has been prescribed for us, if we do every day, that has been recommended in the scripture, we set our mind not to look for the results of our action, give away the mentality of wanting to enjoy the results of our action. In this way, we will not be entangled between punya and papa. As we saw earlier, punya because we did the dharma as said in the scripture. Papa, we failed to do the dharma as prescribed in the scripture. We will avoid both when we do it with phalatyaha. That will lead one towards Krishna, towards moksha, which means our connection to the prakrti is shivered. Again, what is the practical application for one to develop those 20 qualities, which we have already seen, which is also part of the 20 quality, is to take the shelter of a spiritual master, to be in a place where the devotees are present, and be in the association of devotees who have these qualities, associate with them very often, and take up devotional services in a humble mode. In this way, one can develop those 20 qualities and one can become free from those 4 unfavorable qualities. So, in this sloka, we learned that the connection between Atma and Prakriti is beginningless. and the changes that we see that happens is because of the prakrti. We will continue further on the effect in the next sloka, number 21. Prakṛtiṁ puruṣaṁ caiva viddhy anādī ubhāv api vikārāṁś guṇāṁś caiva viddhi prakṛti-sambhavān.
Namaste. Hare Krishna.